Transmedia, just a tip.
Hello, we are today in a very special edition of Transmedia from Glasgow. We want to thank you, Glasgow Caledonian University. We are from the Alex Ferguson Library, that's right?
That's exactly correct.
And we have listened to Lindsey Drylie Carey, that is a reader in Glasgow Caledonian University. It's not your first time in Transmedia?
No, I think this must be my third time.
At least.
At least.
And we have as well Professor Tom Barlett. Professor Tom Barlett is coming not from far away.
No, just from the other side of the town, from Glasgow University, where I'm at the English Language and Linguistics Department.
Glasgow University, and there you are the director of the Department of Linguistics, English Literature.
English Language and Linguistics, not literature, that's part of the same school.
And you are a professor as well, and you are as well, the reason you are here is because you are the leader and the creator of the event Communicating Sustainabilities that has happened to have two editions.
Yep.
2022 and the last one was 2024.
That's right, yep.
And today we're speaking about sustainability. And okay, welcome to Transmedia. Let's start.
Thank you.
To start with, I will want to, because obviously it's a bit scary to be with two prominent academics as you are, reader, professor, with a lot of experience in projects, publications, etc. And sometimes it can happen, we can have two possible issues. The first one is that I make a question and nobody answers. So in that way, you will listen something like, that, okay, if nobody answers, that's crickets. And the other eventuality can happen that you start speaking like, how do you say, very politely, very academically, you know, using strange words.
Surely not.
And in that way, you will listen probably something like...
That's scary.
Okay. I need to apologize to Tom because Tom didn't know anything about that, but it was Professor Lindsey Drylie that when yesterday she got an intuition to the studio.
An induction.
An induction to the studio. Mm-hmm. And you were very impressed with this.
I like this. I
like
the
it.
sounds.
I'm going to speak all technical just so I can get to provoke that sound.
So let's start with, here we have the challenge. Professor Tom Barlett, we are going to start with you because for Lindsey I think it's the fourth time in Transmedia and she's been as well in different languages, Spanish and English, but the reason you are here, Lindsey, today is because you've been together with Tom and myself as well participating in communicating sustainabilities. Tom, what is communicating sustainabilities?
Okay, I'll try and give it to you in a nutshell. So the idea is that when people think about sustainability, they all have their own ideas of what sustainability means. This isn't just individuals, this is different groups. For example, in the business world, the fashion business world, where you're the experts, in coastal communities perhaps, where they're thinking about where fishing stocks need to be maintained, but at the same time, you need to have the local community sustained. You've got economic sustainability of that local group. You've got cultural sustainability as well, which is slightly different. And it's a question people have different emphases on these different things, but also just conceive of it in different ways. And why that's important to me is, coming from languages, is it means when people are talking to each other, they're not really talking about the same thing, or they've got different understandings. And so when they come together, it's very hard to find... I don't want to talk about a common language, because that suggests sort of eradicating all difference and usually means favouring the most powerful one. But it means they should be able to talk across difference, I think is the way of thinking about it. And so the whole event, the first event, we just invited as many people as possible and asked them to present on what it meant in their area of expertise, their industry or their department, whatever, subject. A very lively event, but we tried to squeeze far too much into 2 days, but it was great fun. But then the strands that had the most follow-up with yourselves, with your communicating threads, sustainable threads. Sustainable threads in the fashion industry. The tourism by Guillaume Colom Montero from Glasgow. My interest in coastal communities and also just general language issues were 4 areas that we focused on for the second edition, which we called, the first edition was called Communicating Sustainability, singular, and then we were networking with other universities around the world, and our partners in Goucher College in the USA suggested we change it to Communicating Sustainabilities to capture the point that it means different things to different people. And so last year we had those 4 very productive all-day workshops focusing on those 4 issues of fashion, over-tourism, marine communities and language barriers.
Do you think that's an issue, Tom, that it's so many different? Because I think we've noticed that when we've looked at...
I think we are listening to the Tom, no? We listen to it like a chair.
I'm very happy to get.
No, the noise of the chair, I mean.
No, but I thought this was a talk with some coffee, so that's what I'm taking it as.
Yeah, but it's starting to be a bit scary, the noise of the chair. No, please, sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm good.
No, I was just made me think, because when we're looking at it from our perspective, it's all, sustainability within the fashion industry is a very specific area, and as you said, tourism and things, and because there is very much siloed, I think, and that was one of the things that came out of the research that we've done, and I've been looking for a definition of sustainability that goes across the different industries or the different areas, and I can't really find one. And do we need one, or?
To me, yeah, that's a huge question, and to my mind, the direction I would come from is no, because I think that a single definition wouldn't capture all the different facets of it, and it would come from one particular group, really, or be written by committee, and we know what that ends up looking like. So to me, it's not finding a common language, and I think that's quite important, because common language always favours the most powerful people. It's about trying to understand what other people mean by sustainability, and that is different. But so it's recognising that we all mean different things, but maybe, and that there is some commonality, but trying to narrow that down, I think, and define it very specifically, I'm not sure is the right approach. I think it's very important to have individual terms that we understand, but the whole point of the communicating sustainability, from my perspective, was that we have different understandings of it. So a single definition would get rid of those different understandings and cut down the dialogue. So it was an idea of just it's the sort of thing we do in the social sciences a lot. We have loose definitions. We all like to find them in different ways and work with them, and the hard science people hate it. Maybe I'm showing my background there. But so from my point of view, I don't think there is a single definition. But I think we can all agree on certain elements of it, and we all focus on different elements. And it's just to find a way of trying to understand what other people are saying without necessarily having exactly the same words for it.
I think one of the issues, sorry, Esteban, one of the issues, though, from that is that then it's not easy to take best practice from other, because industries think, well, that doesn't apply to me because that's in a different area. And then, but there are things definitely that cross over. And I think that keeping that kind of focus on separate definitions stops sometimes this cross-fertilisation, which I think would be really useful in some areas. Agree
totally, and I think that's the whole point of the event, was to sort of open up exactly these conversations. And throughout the event, it has got this global idea of communicating sustainabilities, but there are different strands within it, and how each different subject area or industry area goes about it is it's autonomous, as it were. So I'd agree that locally you probably want to have definitions, and maybe within your area of expertise, fashion industry or even industry, having agreed terms that everyone knows these are the terms, how we use them in this context, is really important. They might not be the right terms for a totally different sector, and that is a problem. But I think it's a real problem that as we recognise that it is different, and therefore what works for us isn't going to work for someone else, and there is no fix, and sometimes recognising there's no total fix is important. But I agree that if you're working in certain areas at certain times, it's very useful to have this shared vocabulary. But I think to have an understanding, and that's maybe one of the things that the event was supposed to promote, to have the understanding that it might not mean this for other people. We're using this common language because it's helpful in our sector, but when we go to another group, they're not going to have that same common language, and it's just being aware of that difference. So at different times and places for having commonalities, I would say.
I think, for example, when we sometimes going outside for coming back is useful. When we speak about democracy, for example, it's said that when you apply adjectives to the democracy, it's because it's not a real democracy. You know, for example, in Spain, democracy, when Franco, it was called that it was an organic democracy. You know, obviously by the government at the moment, etc. And it was obviously not one. Now in South America we see the different nominations. So sometimes I think it's important, even if we are not able to agree on a single definition, to agree about what is not sustainability. And sustainability, for example, and this is a question for both of you, is a journey, is a destination. We can agree that at the moment maybe it's not a destination, it's more a journey. What do you think? What is the nose of attached to the term that it can help us to develop this journey? Because the other thing is, 5 years ago we were discussing about the why it was important to implement sustainability, and now it's not anymore. We all understand the necessity to implement sustainability of all our research. But we are discussing and speaking about the how. It's important, no? We have advanced in the last 5-10 years. But a journey, what destination, what do you think?
Well, from the perspective that I'm most familiar with, which is obviously in the fashion industry, it's definitely a journey. And that's how I think brands and fashion companies view it, because they are very much at the forefront of issues related to consumers looking at them and looking for their sustainability credentials more and more. And they have so many different aspects of their production, selling, supply chain, textiles, etc., that are involved in within sustainability, within the industry, that I think to approach everyone at the same time would just be too onerous for them and too difficult. So I think from that perspective, I think, you have to view it as a journey. And it's the same journey that consumers make, for example, when they're looking at, and I'm talking here just again in the fashion sense, kind of looking at their habits related to buying fashion, and they start thinking about it in terms of, well, can I reduce my purchasing of garments? Can I use more? Can I repair them, etc.? And again, it's a journey of discovery. So you can't, I think, address in this particular industry everything all at once. So it has to be a journey. And I think in terms of communicating, they are very sometimes reticent to communicate about it, because one aspect they've maybe kind of looked at sustainability issues related to it, but then they've got another aspect of the supply chain which they haven't got to yet, and they're so worried about that aspect overtaking the one they have looked at that it can pose a real problem for them in terms of communication. So that's just another kind of extended area that's related to that topic.
Absolutely, agree totally. I would say it's a constant journey, always a journey. But there might be little stations along the way which you aim for. And when you get there, you stand back and reconsider. Things change, and you might change direction. But so it's not just always just moving. There are times to sit and reflect and think about what's going on, but that will change. I mean, you talked about how the idea of sustainability has changed even in the last 10 years. And some of the stuff you sent me to read before this, the idea, about sustainability in production, but also sustainability in sourcing, sustainability in recycling, sustainability in getting rid of waste products. All these are extra things that have come along over time in the business world to think about. This is what we've got to think about. And so that changes the definition of sustainability. That's why I'm a bit loath to have fixed definitions. I liked your idea of defining it in terms of what it's not. That's quite always a useful thing. We should know things not to do. But also in terms of broad practices and areas to look at. I mean, so the 3S, or one of the several 3SE models, I did Google 3SE, and it's an acronym that's used by lots of different people with slightly different words. But in the 3SE model that you were talking about was ethics,
Economical,
environment,
and
social aspects.
social, 3E and S.
That was an exam.
It was just because I couldn't remember.
You could do the scary noise for that.
And I got the number of E's and the number of S's reversed. But there's several models of that which shows the difficulty of pinning it down. But I think this idea of what we're trying not to do, but also these are the areas we've got to look about. We've got to think about what it means in terms of, not just the industry, for example, keeping your fashion industry, but if you're building a factory in a certain area, or if you're sourcing materials for a certain area, you've got responsibility out with that local area to think about the community, how it will affect livelihoods, etc. So it's a rolling issue, and different people, as you said, Lindsay, focus on different things. And in doing so, they develop their own ideas and thoughts. And there is a danger that it becomes siloised, which is useful for communication within an in-group, as it were. But that makes it very difficult if you have these fixed ideas and definitions that help you to function. If you then go and deal with government or local communities or civic societies who will be coming from a totally different place with different language that suits them. And so it's a question of just recognising what it means to you, recognising what it means to others, and trying to find ways to navigate those. So, and another simile of a journey, rather than fixing it, it's just learning to navigate all the time, I think.
Okay, sorry, Lindsay.
I just wonder as well, it made me think when you're talking there that it can sometimes be sustainability is kind of like a buzzword that everybody's using, and actually nobody really actually knows what it means.
And they are scared to recognize, and we are scared to,
Yeah, I mean, buzzwords, and they go out of fashion as well.
Yeah.
Already sustainability sounds a little bit old-fashioned.
It
People
does.
don't like it. Empowerment was a great word from the 90s, and now you say empowerment, say, well, what's that? We've got way beyond empowerment. So it is scary about that. But buzzwords, we say about democracy, that's an interesting one from a linguistic point of view, and sustainability. They're what we call empty signifiers. It means they can mean lots of different things to different people, and they fill them with their own meanings, so that you're able to have very different-looking democracies, able to say, this is what democracy means for us and what democracy means for you, because it's a word that you can take and use sometimes not very legitimately to your own advantage, but usually legitimately.
Okay, so sustainability is a journey. We agree on that.
Yeah.
It's a journey with stations, with milestones. And when I'm planning a trip, I normally plan in advance. Then obviously you can improvise, but 2 hours, kilometers. So for measuring that journey, maybe we need measurable data, indicators, even case studies. For providing data, because the consumer, the companies are doing a journey, and if they don't have the data, they can lose the perspective for. So I think maybe this is the mission of academics, providing measurable data, indicators, stories, storytelling, case studies. Do you have any example that can help, any experience, any practical example that can help to realize, to have this awareness about the journey, where we are in each moment, for not losing perspective?
Well, I think there's 2 points to that. First of all, this kind of how to measure something. And I think there are certainly, again, going back to the fashion industry, something, related to accreditations. And what's happened is there are a number of institutions that are associations that have created accreditations, which are more or less, sometimes you have to pay money to get them, etc. So they're more or less, viable for or objective, I would say. Then there's accreditations in terms of, or regulations related to the government, who impose some regulations, and again the European Union have been kind of strong in that, and other countries follow more or less, but then again there's differences across borders, etc. So that's one thing, the accreditation. In terms of measuring how how different companies measure their sustainability or their credentials, and how consumers can find the information on that. it's a difficult job because again, there's no agreed measurement for different areas. So I think definitely, I mean, we've done some case studies related to some companies who are seen as very sustainable in certain areas, and that's good for teaching, for etc. But also, I think taking people into industry and showing them what kind of new employability skills are going to be required for all these different new emerging areas related to sustainability, such as accreditation, etc., is another really important aspect of it.
Yeah, I think there's lots of things of interest there in both the question and what you're saying there, Lindsay. I think if we're taking that, thinking of the metaphor, when you're setting out on a journey, I thought you were going to say you have a destination in mind, but then also thinking about your idea about it's what we don't want to do. Maybe sometimes you just want to get away from a place, and so you don't actually care where you're going, so you're measuring how far away you are. When you're a teenager and you want to get away from home, you don't care where you're going, the distance is away from home. So that's maybe the metaphor we want, but I think it's a really important point in what you're saying in the practical world of industry, that these milestones we do need to fix, and we do need to have measurables. Measurables are always problematic, but if we change measurables and definitions too often, you're going to create a lot of dissatisfaction and things not working, because if you're suddenly, we don't know where we're going, but if we know where the next station is, and then you're halfway there, someone says, actually, no, we need to go somewhere else instead, that's going to create a backlash. And I think that's one of the really important issues that I'm interested in, is that if we don't talk to each other very well, and if we keep changing and imposing stuff in ways that don't work for different people, there will be this backlash, and then people just turn totally against the whole agenda. And I think what you said earlier, most people accept sustainability. Yeah, there's a bit of a backlash now. And when it doesn't suit people, they just climate change deniers, bury their head in the sand or whatever, because they're fed up and there's fatigue. And so that's obviously something you want to avoid. So absolutely, I think we need to have some sense of stability so we can get credentials, so people can train to it, so we can then have something to aim for and measure how well we're doing, and then maybe take stock and say, okay, that measurable was useful, that measurable, okay, it's not perfect. Next phase, we'll do something else, but we can't be constantly chopping and changing and passing on mixed messages to people, or else we get nowhere. And that's what really worries me. And this is where I don't come in my professional life with any definition of sustainability or telling people what to do or how to do it or anything like that. I'm just interested in trying to provoke the conversations that keep the ideas alive, because this is my greatest worry, that as soon as either you fix it totally, make it totally fixed, that won't work. But if you have it so fluid that no one pays any attention to it as well, so it's trying to work on that to get people things to do, but that's suitable for them, because we talked about the regulations. This is also one of the problems that we've got to work on. So when you get measurables imposed, say, by the EU previously, or the UK government or the Scottish government, they're coming from a certain place and a certain type of knowledge and from one silo. So going to the area that I'm most interested in, which is local fishing communities, people there will tell you, and I'm not judging who's right or who's wrong, but I'm just saying there are these two types of knowledge, and people there will tell you that science doesn't apply at the local level. So that's a problem. That's another area where you need communication, is translating. We need the data, and one of the things I'm interested in is how you translate local knowledge, people's everyday knowledge that's embedded in their practices, they've never written it down, how you can turn that into a type of evidence that can be accepted by maybe government groups who are then trying to work on a much bigger picture and need a different type of data. And so how you get those two, instead of just automatically falling out with each other and being at loggerheads, which is what has happened, if we can find, and bringing in technology, you talk about being interdisciplinary in the notes you gave, this is where you need to get people in different disciplines working, and how do we get information that can be used at different levels from different, how do we turn it into the sort of data that can move about?
And do you think academics have an important role in that?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, this is where, because interdisciplinarity is from an academic perspective, but I think it needs more than academics. We need to be working with people involved in the industries. They're taking the lead. I think we're facilitators, but I think we're extremely important facilitators, because we've got the time to sit back and think about this stuff. But we're in danger of ending up in our ivory towers and not starting off with, you know, the people at the cotton face or whatever you want to call it, you know, and what people's real needs are, you know, where we can come up with totally abstract ideas that are idealistic, but they're just going to fall flat because they don't engage with people. So academics, we can bring these different knowledge types together and work out how people can talk across these differences, but at the end of the day, we're just the facilitators. It's the businesses and the local communities and the politicians who are the real...
I mean, that's why I liked communicating sustainability so much, or the format of it, because it was one of the events that you could have industry, you could have academics, you could have students, you could have members of the public if they were interested in it to come and so, I mean, how is that going to develop in the future? I mean, is that going to keep going, or what's going to happen with that?
No, that's a really good question, and one for me personally as well. It started off as the one-off event, and then we had the repetition of it because of the, you know, those 4 areas, including yourselves, where there's so much work done. But it struck me, that's a great catalyst, and people get very, very enthusiastic. And we know in academia, and then 6 months later is the next chance you have next time you have any chance to follow up on this. So maybe just changing it. So what we want to sort of do is create a hub. So in a way, part of the event, as you say, bringing together all these disparate groups, was to get people to meet, chat to each other, get to know each other, and to see if there was a concrete project that could be developed that involved academics, business people, local communities, etc. Whoever, just it was to bring people together and let them find their own projects. And I think communicating sustainability is going forward will mainly be doing that, was to create a space, a forum, a web presence where we have all these different groups in, and we have periodic events and events at different scales where people can just get to know each other and then develop their own projects. It's a meeting space, and whether we'll have the annual or biannual event anymore, I don't know whether that's practical. But it's that idea, bringing people together to chat and say, oh, wait a minute, we could look into that.
I mean, are you aware of any other kind of similar, you know, sort of event or because I'm not.
there are events that are connected, but I don't think there are any that quite bring together that mix of groups, which for me is really important. And with that flexibility, I've seen a lot of them becoming quite academic, and their presentations about, learned presentations that would get Estevan's sound effect all the time. They're not speaking to industry. I need one to follow this sound effect. Go on. Because a lot of them would get that straight away, and they're not really.
I'm starting liking.
So I'm not aware. I think there are other events and groups that do some of the stuff, but it hasn't got that focus on bringing people together to try and chat to each other and develop a project across disciplines, but more importantly across different sectors, again, the public, the politicians, academics together to try and research something concrete. And it could be something very, very tiny, like, we've got a weaving cooperative that came along to the first event. It might be just looking at their practice at one, a rural weaving business in northeast Scotland. Or it could be looking at, Scottish government policy for highly protected marine areas. Yeah. It depends whatever comes up and whatever expertise comes together. So no, it is. I don't think there's anything else quite like it.
I'm going to say something a bit controversial now.
Good.
Because I think that kind of the ethos of the communicating sustainabilities comes a lot from probably the openness with which you approach it in terms of, that people can, from different disciplines, industry, etc., you're very happy to have everybody. And I think in academia that's not easy to find because people want to keep things very closed.
That's possibly true. Well, I'm glad you think that, because that is exactly what.
Be careful, Tom. While you be careful in the way that you.
Of course, all the academics I know are perfect, but that is also, I think, it's important. And then what came out of it with the second one was when we decided to try it. Well, you actually got, as soon as the first one finished, you said, "Oh, if you're running another, I'd like to do something." So I think that passing on and how each strand wants to organise itself and whether they want to be close knit, whether it's important. But I think that's the underlying ethos of the whole thing is trying to get as many ways of doing things coming together as possible. So I think that would be the underlying ethos from my perspective. And then if people want to focus in on things, that's also fine.
Yeah.
I think we are in a journey that is called sustainability, but if we do agree that it's a journey, are different journeys. We are in Scotland today. For coming here at university, I came by metro. If I want to go up north, I will take the train, the bus, maybe the car. But if I want to go to an island, in Scotland, you have different islands, probably you need a ferry. So when we are speaking about journeys, we try to use the same data, the same KPIs all the time for measuring what is happening in a local community and what is happening in a big factory, it's not going to work because we're using different means of transport in our daily life. And how can from academia, because we need to standardize on the one hand, but on the other hand we need to adapt, because you don't try to get by train to the beautiful island Suarran, for example, for naming one of the islands you have here in Scotland.
No, I agree. And I think it comes back to Lindsay's earlier point about, regularization of terminology and stuff like that, where you need to have that at a certain level to be operable. This is how language works, We all understand each other most of the time when we get by, but there's a lot of times when we speak differently and don't understand each other, and that's essential for keeping the language alive. That's where the innovation comes in. So it's actually quite a good thing. So, but we need to have a certain level of understanding, or else we couldn't communicate. So I think it's the same, we're not fixed. Or else you get senescence, to use I'm in danger of getting a button, but senescence is when something gets old, senile, stops changing, and it dies out because it's not adapting. In business, this is, we know the oldest licensed company in the world, I think, just went out of existence. It created prayer shrines in Japan, and they've been going since something like 1100. But all it produced was prayer shrines, and there was not much market demand for that anymore. So they were absolutely brilliant at what they did, but they didn't do anything else, and eventually they withered away. So it's that. But it is that you need that specialisation. You need to be really good at what you're doing at the right level, and that brings in standard terminology, people knowing what they're talking about. But you need to be able to reach out and touch into those other ones. So sometimes you need to get a ferry, sometimes you need to get a train, absolutely. But if you're the ferry operator, you need to know all about ferries.
It's not the same 5 kilometers by car, it's not the same than 5 kilometers by ferry. You cannot charge the same, you cannot...
I think it makes me think also the metaphor is related to kind of critical thinking, and this is what we try and do with our students in education. It's not so much about the knowledge, because we all know that we can get. It's about critical and so choosing the right.
How do you say critical thinking?
Sorry. Choosing the right mode of transport to go to the destination is the same, I think, as that we need to have the ability to be able to be flexible in terms of our terminology for sustainability. So,
it made me think of a funny anecdote when all the local branches of banks were being closed down, and it was being done at a sort of grand level. They were going to close down the Royal Bank of Scotland in Castlebay, and the official notification said, your nearest branch is 5.7 miles away. Okay, 5.7 miles, but that included a sea crossing. So you would have to go, get the ferry, wait for the ferry, catch the ferry, drive up to Loch Boysdale, turn around, so it would be a day to go there and back. So this is when people don't think at the right scale, and you try and do that.
Yeah.
Okay, we are finishing, we are in a journey, we have different means of transport. Always a trip should have, if it's a proper trip, it should have some dangers. And obviously in this journey we have dangers. I have identified 2 of them, and one is called greenwashing. The other is more new, but is very, very now trending to the industry. It's called greenhashing. Can you explain both of them? What's about and why is a danger? Why is the way that the way that companies are dealing with these 2 concepts, greenwashing and greenhashing? I'm going to play probably for myself. Yeah.
Yes. I was going to say you could maybe explain the second one, because I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so let's start with now is. No, but we have a linguistic here, an expert in.
Well, Again,
birds are getting crazy.
as a linguist, my job would be to try and find what that word means to the people who use it. Rather than opposed. But I was fascinated. I only came across that word this morning in preparation for this. Green hushing I hadn't heard of before, and this is people's reluctance to talk about their achievements for whatever reason, and I'm sure there are many. But what are the reasons? I was fascinated. I get some of it. People don't want to. They're worried that they'll be accused of not using that. Actually, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, doesn't it? If they're heading for a particular station and they get there, they might be worried to announce they've got there. If someone else says, "No, sorry, you shouldn't have gone. You should be going to a totally different station," and they're just, "No, let's keep it in house." I suppose is one example. But yeah, tell me more about green hushing, because
I think green hushing and greenwashing is like the yin and the yang. You
Okay.
cannot explain one without the other. So you know that when sustainability has become trendy in fashion industry 10 years ago, in food industry 20, 30 years ago, obviously brands envision as an opportunity and they start communicating what they are doing, sometimes in more authentic or less, sometimes more transparent or less. And obviously people, the consumers, not always agree, and they find that they are just using sustainability for, as an asset for branding higher and not as a real purpose for their company. So greenwashing is about, the adjective that describes the show off of the company is about that, and not a real one, authentic. It's about that, no, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, it's very prominent in the fashion industry when, for example, a big brand has one line of clothing made with organic cotton, and then the rest is made with completely, unsustainable textiles. So that's it's exactly that. So it's kind of like showing off one area which is not representative of the rest of the production. Can I just say, it's because of your accent I didn't understand green hushing. I didn't understand what you said.
But
in my defence,
have you not got another button for that?
And green, help me please, green hushing.
Green hushing, yes.
Green hushing, okay. Ibuprofen? No, we have an anecdote. Can you tell the anecdote with ibuprofen?
No, I was looking for ibuprofen in Spain and in a pharmacy, and Esteban said to me, "Well, you can get how did you pronounce it?
Ibuprofeno.
Ibuprofeno." And I said, "What's ibuprofeno?" And I said, "Ibuprofen." And he said, "Go into the pharmacy and ask for ibuprofen and see if you get it."
No, it's the accent. It's always obviously it's a journey. It's a journey. I think it's a journey. So green hushing is again the companies have decided that, especially I think the companies that are doing very well, that probably they don't want to be right. They don't want to get mistakes in social media, because the bad communication that they can receive can be huge sometimes, depending who is criticizing. And they are avoiding this topic because it's becoming a bit toxic.
Yeah.
In terms of that doesn't matter whatever you are doing, you could do more, and this is very toxic.
No, and not just you could do more. I think it made me think about, for example, when you have something that goes wrong. So, for example, I'm particularly interested in the highly protected marine areas in Scotland, which is areas that were sort of not quite randomly designated, but 30% of coastal waters that weren't to be used for extraction. And there was not very much consultation. There was very poor consultation, very poor legislation, and it fell through. And that created so much bad feeling in the local fishing communities that any mention of environmentalism is tarred with the same brush. Mm. And so therefore these terms that fall out, sometimes they fall out just because they're tired, other times, they're connected with one specifically disastrous example. And so people turn against all measures, all government measures, all outside measures at environmentalism because of that. So maybe you might have green hushing, well, let's avoid the term environmentalism or something because it's carried. So I think it's a fascinating concept, and I've never heard it before, but I think it's got lots of potential areas where it could be interesting to follow up on green hushing.
I need to tell you that we have arrived to the end of this journey, but I don't want to finish without that you try to figure out what is in this image? Do you recognize the place? Do you recognize it?
Yeah, of course. My father grew up on that house.
Wow. Is that Barra?
Yeah, that's Barra. That's
Barra.
Our Lady Star of the Sea Church. And just down from there is the doctor's house where my dad grew up in the 20s, 30s.
Wow.
Let me show I don't know if in the camera, for people that are watching us in YouTube, they can watch it. In any case, we can add in the description. Where is Barra?
Oh, Barra is in the Western Islands of Scotland. So it's about 30 miles off the west coast of Scotland, 5-hour ferry trip or an hour-long plane trip, part of the archipelago known as the Hebrides, or the Outer Hebrides, with Lewis as the northernmost and all the way down to Barra and then to Vatersay. So it's relatively isolated as far as Britain goes. And it's where my father grew up and I have strong connections with, and that's a lot of my focus has been. It's been those areas in those Scottish waters are where the highly protected marine areas were sort of, I'm going to say imposed, or they tried to impose them, and it created a lot of backlash. And so it's an area that I find particularly interesting because I've invested in both sides of the discussion. So I'm quite happy to stand back and be neutral because I'm just trying to encourage fishermen there to be able to have a voice in negotiations over the futures.
Do they still do a lot of fishing out of Barra?
Well, it went down to, apparently, according to an old documentary I saw recently about it, there was only one ship fishing out of Barra at one stage, but they opened a fish factory, which made a huge difference.
Right.
Really, I was actually having watched that documentary again, trying to think what life would be like on Barra, whether it'd still have a healthy population if that fish factory hadn't been opened. Is very interesting because it means there's quite a number of boats going out of Barra. People also connect with the merchant navy more, but it's changing industry. But there's a lot of it's a heavily reliant on the fish industry and how that feeds. And this is again to what sustainability means, because the existence of the fishing industry means the population stays relatively high, which means that children stay on the island, which means you've got a school system which has got enough teachers instead of having to, so it's all interconnected. So sustainability, that's just quite hard to put down a definition. But yeah, it's still be a fishing community, yeah.
I must say just one thing, sorry, because I visited Barra once, and I have quite a few years ago, and I have a fantastic memory of it, and I've always wanted to go back. So we're dangers of over tourism, but Barra's okay. Barra's still quite safe. Yeah.
The reason of finishing with Barra is because you know that one of the definitions of sustainability is the 3 Ps: people, planet, and profit. The balance between these three areas. But we are obviously developing research, and we are considering introducing, as other authors are proposing, 4P, that is purpose. This is maybe the purpose, Barra, what you are so interested in sustainability and local communities, is what is root and what makes a meaning, gives a meaning for
that's
you.
what made me, that's why it's of interest to me, and that's why I've committed time to this, exactly, that there's the purpose, but trying to work out what that purpose is and whether it's a station rather than a destination is all very interesting. It's interesting you showed that picture of Barra as well, because Guillem Colom Montero, who did an over-tourism session in the last Communicating Sustainabilities, he's from Majorca, and his focus is on over-tourism in Majorca, which is obviously 1 million tourists an hour or something like that, something totally
a bit
crazy.
Different to Barra.
Exactly. But he took a documentary
No
about...
balconing in Barra, no? You know what is balconing? Balconing. You know what is it? Balconing is a very popular sport in Spain, in the touristic areas. Majorca is people, normally British, going from the balcony to the pool. Not always with good outcomes.
No, it wouldn't work in Barra. If you could find a balcony overlooking the sea, it would be very cold and not advisable. But no, there's none there. But interestingly, though, so Guillem took a film about over-tourism, not his own, but it's about over-tourism in Majorca. And he took it and presented it in Barra, which has a population of 1,200, and maybe the population doubles, possibly triples at the high point of the summer, so very, very different. But the interesting was that a lot of the underlying ideas and lessons about what was happening in Majorca, the people on Barra latched onto and could interpret, what it meant to them and rethink it about what it meant in terms of their own community and how tourism changes your way of life, and maybe an over-reliance on it can be detrimental. Again, it's not for me to say, but really interesting. I think Guillaume was very impressed with he was quite surprised that there's total difference in scales, but yet there were common fears.
Very interesting.
One last photo.
Oh.
Do you identify the place?
Well, I do.
I'm guessing it's in Fife, but
It's Fife, so that's Lower Largo
Lower Largo.
in Fife, yeah.
Ah.
So the east coast and part of the East Neuk. In fact, the first village of the East Neuk, if you're coming from Edinburgh on Kirkcaldy, and then it goes right round with Crail, Pittenweem, and then St Andrews.
And Largo is famous because
Of Robinson Crusoe, because Daniel Defoe based his book on Robinson Crusoe, who was Alexander Selkirk, who came from Lower Largo.
and your connection with the place is
Well, actually, my aunt used to live in the house of Alexander Selkirk, who used to be, and there's a statue
Oh, actually, in the house itself?
commemorating that exact place. And we used to have a family home there, which was also reportedly, supposedly belonged to an uncle of Alexander
Oh,
Selkirk.
wow.
So
any connection about your interest in sustainability and local communities?
definitely local communities. I mean, it's, again, there's actually last year, the last fisherman retired. And he's a friend of mine, and he used to bring lovely lobsters to me when I went there in the summer. And now that's it. That's over, and it's really.
So there's no one fishing at all out
no
Lower
one
Largo?
fishing at all now out of Lower. And there used to be, when I remember going there as a child, or in my youth, there used to be proper fishing boats going out of the harbour in Largo, and that doesn't happen anymore. They still do out of St Andrews and I think
Pittenweem, I think.
yeah, but it's very sad.
We have landed in two beautiful destinations, Barra, Lower Largo. I propose you one challenge. Continuing this conversation, probably with another nice flat white in one of the cafes, or lovely cafes in Lower Largo that I know. I haven't been yet in Barra, and it would be very nice to continue this podcast over there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Transmedia, just a tea.